Games of the Darkness. In a remote village, two friends, Tom and Michael, lived. Tom lived at the edge of the village, near the old village cemetery. One day the boys were playing outside and didn't notice when it grew late. Tom suggested that Michael spend the night at his house, and Michael agreed to stay. Before bed, Tom warned Michael not to look out the window into the darkness during the night, and then the boys went to sleep. Michael couldn't fall asleep in this new place, as it was his first time staying at Tom's. Unable to sleep, he got up, walked to the window, drew back the curtain, and saw children playing in the playground near Tom's house. The boys were all dressed in suits and the girls wore festive dresses. Michael couldn't understand where these children had come from since he knew all the kids in the village, but he had never seen these ones before. When he looked at their faces, Michael was terrified. He couldn't see their eyes, only dark hollows. The children moved strangely, as if in slow motion. The children didn't speak to each other, they just played. Suddenly they all turned towards Michael, and he heard a voice in his head inviting him to come out and play with them. But Michael only heard the voice, he couldn't see who was speaking, as the children's lips were still. He grew even more frightened and tried to move away from the window, but something held him, as if an unseen force was preventing him from moving. Michael looked toward the cemetery to avoid seeing the children and noticed that many people of various ages were standing by the cemetery fence, all staring at him. It seemed that the fence acted as a barrier, keeping them from crossing. Michael wanted to run, but he couldn't move. It was as if something invisible was holding him in place. He began to notice that his body was slowly dissipating, like fading light. Suddenly, Michael heard a quiet but clear whisper near his ear, "Don't look. Don't give in to them." The voice, though faint, made him realize that this wasn't just a dream. He had to do something, but his body remained paralyzed. Desperate, Michael tried to pull his gaze away from the eerie children in the cemetery, but the force still held him fast to the window. Then, slowly, the window began to open, allowing the cold night air to seep in. The children's whispers grew louder, "Come play with us." Just as Michael felt his will almost completely succumbing to the darkness, the door to the room creaked open, and Tom walked in. His eyes were serious as he saw Michael standing by the window holding the curtain. "I told you not to look," Tom whispered firmly. "They're looking for friends like us." Michael shivered in terror and slowly let go of the curtain, stepping away from the window. He stood face to face with Tom, who looked pale. "Does this always happen?" Michael managed to ask. Tom nodded slowly. "It's their game. They want you to join. But once you start, you never leave." Michael stared at Tom, realizing that this was far more serious than he had ever imagined. They were trapped between two worlds, the living and the dead. The only question that remained was whether they could escape. In a small town, a group of friends spent their days playing outside. On hot days, they would go swimming at the lake with their parents, as they weren't allowed to swim alone. One particularly hot summer day, the children asked their parents if they could go swimming, but the parents were very busy and suggested going another time, as the beach was a long walk away. The children told their parents they were going to the stadium to play football, but instead they decided to head to the lake without permission. However, they didn't go to the usual beach. They chose a spot closer to them. To reach the lake, the children had to pass through a cemetery hidden in the forest, as the lake was just beyond it. They decided to swim and play football there. So, they set out. After swimming, the children noticed a few unfamiliar kids standing on the shore. The newcomers invited them to play, and the friends agreed. As they played, Jonas noticed something odd about these new children. They were dressed strangely, in almost identical outfits, dress pants and white shirts. Their eyes were clouded over, as if covered in mist. These children played without any emotion and moved stiffly, as though something was holding them back. Jonas then realized that dark clouds were gathering in the sky, and it was time to go home. The friends got ready to leave. As the friends prepared to leave, Jonas noticed that the other children, the ones dressed strangely, didn't seem to be getting ready. Some of them, they simply stood there, as if waiting for something. One of them, a boy in a white shirt with a serious expression, suddenly spoke in a cold voice, "It's too early to leave. Let's play a little longer." Jonas froze and glanced around. All of his friends looked uncomfortable as they stared at the strangers. A chill ran down Jonas' spine as he realized that these children weren't normal. Not only were their movements strange, but their eyes seemed dim, lifeless. Suddenly, the air around them began to change. A cold wind blew from the direction of the lake, and the clouds overhead grew heavier. At the same time, Jonas heard a strange sound coming from the direction of the cemetery, as if someone was whispering softly. He turned and saw that the strange children had moved, positioning themselves behind his friends, as if surrounding them. Their eyes gleamed with a strange, dead light. "So we have to go," Jonas tried to warn his friends, but they, as if hypnotized, started following the strange children, who were silently beckoning them toward the cemetery. Jonas' heart pounded faster. He knew something was very wrong. These children who invited them to play weren't from their world, and now they were leading them into the cemetery, where something dark and dangerous waited. He gathered all his strength and rushed toward his friends, shouting, "We have to run now." But an invisible force seemed to be pulling him back, dragging him into the cold darkness from which the whispers came. Jonas felt a cold hand on his shoulder. He gasped and turned around. It was the same boy in the white shirt, his lifeless eyes staring at him. The boy's hand was thin and stiff, but it gripped Jonas' shoulder tightly. "You have to stay with us," the boy whispered, his voice sounding as if it came from another world. "We've been here forever, and now you will stay too." Jonas felt the air around him grow thick, as if time itself was slowing down. He tried desperately to break free, but the pull toward the cemetery grew stronger. He watched as his friends disappeared through the gates, fading into the mist, and he knew that if he didn't escape now, he would never return home.